Hello everybody! I got to play the Elden Ring Nightreign Network test for around 7 hours. I participated in 2 sessions, technically 3, seeing as I did participate in the extra session that was held by FromSoft because, one of the sessions didn't work correctly, the one on Valentine's Day, the very first one, but I participated in that one very briefly, just checking out the game, and then the other 2 I fully played through for 3 hours and 15 minutes because, the sessions didn't end at the minute, so everything was a little longer than usual. So yeah, I managed to play the network test. I want to give a huge shout out to user jmastaock on Reddit. I hope I pronounced that correctly. I really do, because I'm so thankful for this person who was generous enough to give me their code of Elden Ring Nightreign of the network test version because they themselves couldn't play. Instead of letting a code go to waste, they gave it to me, which allowed me to experience around 7 hours of this game, which was absolutely fantastic. So thank you so much. Oh my god, thank you so much. I have no words. For those of you who don't know me, and for those of you who do, you might not know that I'm such a huge From Software fan that I've played all of their games, completed many, and the others I haven't completed are Dark Souls 2, which is, of course, very valid, I guess. That aside, I'm a huge fan of From Software Souls-like games, and I've completed Sekiro, Bloodborne, Dark Souls 3, and Elden Ring, and I'm currently on my way beating Demon's Souls for the PS5, Dark Souls 1, and Dark Souls 2, which all are phenomenal games, and I fell absolutely in love with the entire genre via From Software's Dark Souls 3. So when Nightreign came around and was announced as the new title that From Software would be releasing in 2025, I was absolutely hyped. I signed up for the network test, didn't get in, and then I still got in. Once again, thank you to user jmastaock for letting me get into that. Oh, and I'm a certified American citizen now, on the PlayStation at least, so hell yeah. Either way, when I first heard that From Software was going to release a roguelike Elden Ring type of game, I was a little bit scared at first, because this sounded very, very ambitious, and this game, after having played it for 7 hours, it is kind of ambitious. The whole gameplay cycle is so much more different, and sadly I can't really show that off as much because, the PlayStation did not allow for recording the network test, and I'm not one of those fancy big boy YouTubers like Vati Vidya, Iron Pineapple, or Zero Lenny, Lil Aggie, those guys. I'm not rich. I cannot afford a capture card to capture my PS5 externally. I cannot do that. I can record little bits with my phone, and also I try to be a good boy and not immediately make From Software mad because, I'm still one of the smaller boys. If I ever get big, then From Software sees this and they ban me from ever playing their games again. Jokes aside, I didn't record any footage because, I didn't really have the means to do it, and I have heard that some of the big YouTubers, like the ones that were flown out to the big playtesting event for Bandai Namco US, got some extra 12-minute long video footage of Elden Ring Nightreign and like a pre-recorded gameplay session, which, yeah, I'm not one of the big YouTubers. I didn't even get a mail from Bandai Namco or From Software, neither of those two saying, going like, hey, you can play Nightreign. No, I had to get in externally. Damn it! Going back to the topic at hand, wow, this video is just like Nightreign itself. You try to focus on an objective, beating a boss together, and then all of you just split up. That aside, really, I want to talk in this video about my thoughts about this video game, as someone who's played a lot of From Software games and hasn't really touched any roguelike games ever. I really want to talk about this game and sort of, share my thoughts with y'all, because I have some concerns, but also some very positive things to say about Elden Ring Nightreign. And, for that, you'll have to watch me get some normal Elden Ring footage on the screen because I'm poor and I'm not going to use other people's footage to make this video because that'd be very poor. Yeah, so enjoy watching me play through Elden Ring whilst I talk about a game that is really fundamentally different from Elden Ring, that is Nightreign. We'll start by just talking a little bit about how a regular round of Nightreign looks. Then we'll talk a little bit about the positives and some of the best game sessions I've had. I'll try to talk a little bit about some of the best experiences I've had. And we'll finish off with the concerns and then just a regular, end of a video, a regular outro. I've been yapping for way too long in this intro. Let's actually dive into the game itself. Let me tell you about Elden Ring Nightreign and how various things in this game work. So, when I booted up the network test, I would spawn inside of the Roundtable Hold, which was still the Roundtable Hold, but with some very interesting little adjustments made to it. The damn place was in ruins, light shining through various crevices of broken places inside of the Roundtable Hold. Really, there were some pretty big holes in the place, and there were some plants and vegetation growing all around it. Anyways, this is your base of operation, and I think that in the full game there will be a lot more to do here, because in the network test you could only really equip relics, switch characters, and that's really it. I did read something in the network test about bartering with someone in the Roundtable Hold, a jar person, one of those living jars, where you could barter runes for something. I don't actually know how it works. I think it's just a shop where you can buy items that you can hold on to in between games, or that you can just, equip as a permanent upgrade, but I'm not entirely sure because it wasn't in the game. Right here on screen, if Editor Me does this right, you'll see the character selection screen. In this particular network test, we had to choose between 4 characters: Wilder, the Duchess, the Guardian, and the Recluse. And all of them play fundamentally different, which I'll get back to in a minute, but this is the character selection screen that we had access to and the characters we could select. The other screenshot I have is from the training grounds in the network test, which is a pretty neat way to learn the moveset of each character and learn all of the abilities. Basically, there's this marionette soldier that is lying around that you can activate, and you can take a character, equip an ornament that you like, such as a big great sword or some kind of magic seal or something like that, and you can duke it out with said enemy marionettes to sort of test the abilities of your character and to sort of get a feel for how they play. The Roundtable Hold didn't really have that much to add to the game, mainly because this is a demo where you cannot save any progress either. You can save the progress between network test sessions, but you cannot put any of your progress to the full game, so I think that they, on purpose, From Software did not include that much content here in the Roundtable Hold, and instead left that out to wait for the full game, such as the bartering process, for an example. The only thing you could really do is walk up to the Table of Grace, after which you could click the button and you could start looking for any other friends of yours you wanted to play the game with, or at least random people. I don't know, but I've read on various subreddits and on the internet in various discussions that passwords were disabled for the network test, so I myself too, because I didn't have any friends that ended up in the network test. Haha, got you there. I didn't have anyone to play with in terms of friends or someone else who got the network test that I knew. So, yeah, that's why I didn't use the passwords myself, so I couldn't fact check it, but apparently they weren't working for some of the sessions, so I just played with random people all of the time, and frankly enough, it still worked, even though we couldn't communicate directly. Sometimes we still had, the brain cells linking, and we got some pretty good sessions out of that. More on that later. After up to 2 other people have been found, a game will progress. You will enter a character selection screen of 15 seconds, a bit like the selection screen that I also made a screenshot of. Everyone picks a character. You can see which characters have already been picked by the rest of your crew. And what's also really nice is that even if someone has picked, for an example, Wilder, the very stereotypical jack-of-all-trades knight, you can still pick Wilder as well. I've seen games where people would play as 3 Wilders at once. I usually wanted a bit more variety in the team, so I ended up playing as the Duchess most of the time, because Wilder and the Guardian were very popular, as well as Wilder and the Recluse. They were very popular too. Duchess not as much, so I ended up playing as her a lot, and she was by far my favorite character so far. So yeah, you can pick multiple characters. Even if Wilder has already been chosen, you can still play as him. After that, a cutscene plays and the game will basically begin. You'll be flying on your Spectral Hawk and dropping on a predetermined location. And this is where one of my sort of concerns comes up immediately, because I noticed that we kept getting dropped off at the same point, but that has to do with us playing the same map in the network test. More on that later. But anyways, the game drops you off. It's now up to you to find locations of interest, beat a lot of enemies, and to sort of explore the map you've been dropped in before it gets smaller and smaller and you have to face off against a boss. You're basically trying to scurry all around the map as fast as possible in order to collect as much loot as you can, because you might need it in the future. And during my first round, it was so chaotic because I did not know where to go. There were so many locations on the map, and I saw my allies marking various things. I had no clue what to do. But then I started getting a little bit more nifty nearing the second day of that particular round, and in the later rounds, I started looking around at the map a lot more, and I could identify stuff like Churches of America, fortresses, castles, even caves. There are actually caves in the game, which surprised me, but anyways, after you sort of get the hang of the map and you sort of get used to the chaos, the game becomes literally just running around, scrambling loot together, and defeating as much enemies as possible. In terms of loot, there's a bunch of stuff you really want to look out for. First of all, you really, in one of your 2 days you're on the map, you really want to visit a Church of America, because you get a permanent flask upgrade. It's very small in the UI, but the flasks are hidden somewhere underneath your health bars, and you can only have, you will basically have 3 at the start of your game, but you can upgrade them to like 4 or 5 flasks later down the line, and that's really as much as you're going to need. 4 is pretty decent, 5 is absolutely good, because that allows you to tackle some of the harder objectives later down the line pretty easily, and it really comes in clutch during the boss fights, so you really want to go to one of those Churches of America to get an extra flask upgrade. Another thing I noticed is that there's these crates, which are just the Elden Ring crates, but this time with an orange cloth around that drop consumable items if you break them. And these have varying uses and varying tiers. I found a lot of boluses, the status ailment ignoring consumables, and I usually didn't grab those because they were very situational compared to stuff like boiled prawn, boiled crab that just give straight out stat boosts for a while. And yeah, that's also very important, now that I mentioned it, since these loot have different color thingies. There is a lot of different loot out there, and all of them have different colors. Depending on the color, that gives a certain piece of loot a certain rarity, and it also increases, the more rare the loot is what I'm trying to say, the higher level you need to be in order to wield it. And that's a very interesting aspect, that sometimes you may find an item that you'll really have to level up for later down the line. But regardless, I really like this little concept of having different tiers of loot. For consumables, it doesn't matter, but for equipable items, it's definitely a thing you'll have to watch out for. Sometimes you pick up a weapon that you don't have the level for, and it can become a little bit of a problem. Aside from those crates with an orange cloth, there's the Dark Souls 3 chests, which drop regular items, and then there is various other things of loot out there. There are scarabs, the ones that you also see in Elden Ring. Normally they drop an Ash of War, but in this game they actually drop a talisman. Be wary though that this scarab drops 1 talisman, and every single item you get that isn't from defeating a boss or a boss reward, all those items usually are some kind or are community loot, and that means that only one of your team members can pick it up, the others don't get it, so you really have to divide the loot as well in some instances. If you open a Dark Souls 3 chest and there is a Nagakiba inside, you might want to gift that to maybe Wilder or the Guardian, the Duchess maybe too, depending on what your build you're kind of going for, and let the Recluse not have it, because it really depends on build as well as sort of, who is the best with this weapon, who has the worst weapon in your party currently, who you want to give something to. Speaking of builds and leveling up, when you play this game, there is no build. Every character can use every single item as long as they're high enough level. There is leveling up in this game, but you cannot choose which stats to level. They just increase automatically. All levels are set, and so you auto-level every single time. So yeah, it's really nice to think that even if you play as the Recluse, you can end up wielding a greatsword. Not very likely to happen, because I've noticed that the person who opens the chest does kind of get weapons that fit their sort of character a lot better. As the Duchess, I usually got shotels, daggers, sometimes a katana if I was really lucky, but mostly more nimble and fast weapons compared to Wilder and the Guardian, who usually had some kind of great weapon out there. So that is basically the community split loot, but there's also a type of loot that everyone can obtain and that everyone can get a special item from. This is defeating bosses and getting boss rewards. You can also go to nomadic merchants and purchase items there, as well as you can go to the Rise buildings, those big magic towers, where usually at the top there's also an item for you to find. The way it works is that those rise places, as well as the bosses you defeat, they drop a big, what is it called, some kind of weird orb or some black kind of sphere, at least something with a cool particle effect. And if you interact with it, you can usually choose between one of three things. Two of those are usually a weapon or a shield or some kind of talisman, and the other one is a passive effect, like Frenzied Flame that can trigger upon walking. Whenever you hit an enemy, they sometimes have a sudden chance of getting one shot, or probably my favorite of the two favorite abilities that you could pick up, Lightning upon dodging, which is absolutely busted on the Duchess. It allows you to dodge and then summon a Fortisax Lightning Bolt, which has really good posture damage and really good physical damage. And there is a super sprint in the game that allows you to go very fast around the map. It consumes a bunch of stamina if you're in combat, but if you trigger that, then you have the ability to leave behind a big cloud of frostbite damage, which damages enemies upon triggering that super sprint, which is a really neat ability as you can just do a lot of damage by simple evasive maneuvers. Really powerful stuff. The best part about all of this, though, is that when you defeat a boss like this, everyone can claim one of these rewards. You don't have to share these, which is really handy, but it also sucks that some of your teammates who you can't communicate with might defeat a boss and then claim one of those artifacts whilst you aren't around and you don't know which boss they've defeated. That can be kind of annoying, but if you stick together, you can really work well together in order to just get a bunch of really good loot this way. And finally, the thing you really want to look out for is just generic enemies. Any little bit of runes that you can get your hands on really help in the end, as whenever you're playing the game, leveling up is probably one of the most powerful things you can do in the game, as it literally raises all of your stats, including your defenses and your strength, which really helps out in the boss fights. So any little bit of runes you can snag are some of the most useful things you can get your hands on. Collect those runes, and spare no one, is basically what I'm trying to say. That's really all I can think of right now that you really want to find, and in terms of looting and gameplay, what the core gameplay loop is. It is just running around, defeating as much as possible, and collecting and hoarding as much as possible. And you have to make choices on the fly, because the circle, the Nightreign, which is literally rain, by the way, night rain, which is pretty funny to me, that really funny pun, it constantly gets closer and closer, so more of the map becomes unexplorable every single minute you're playing, so you have to make split decisions. Do I go to this ruin to beat this boss, or do I play it safe and wait it out here and, you know, battle the boss, or go to a dungeon that is within the range that gives me a little more time to beat a boss at hand. You really need to make split-second decisions, and it's really fun to do so, but it can be annoying that if you want to go somewhere but you know you're not going to make it, that sometimes you have to wait for the boss fights to progress, because, you know, otherwise you'll not make it anyway, so it may just be better to wait, and it feels a bit sad that you could have spent this time running around doing something still, and instead you're not doing that, and you're just waiting. So there's 3 games that really still stick in my mind, or that I still remember very vividly, because they are very, very fun, or that they were very, very memorable. Like, a lot of them were failed attempts. From all of the times I played the network test, I only managed to beat the boss, the Night Lord, I think twice. It would have been 3 times if the servers didn't close at the, 3-hour mark, because that is how long the network test went for. But otherwise, I would have beaten the boss Gladius of Traciphylax, I thought its name was. I don't remember really. I have a bit of a mixed naming thing there, because the boss's health bar said Gladius, but Traciphylax was the name in the Round Table Hold. I don't remember anymore. Not important, but I'm from all of the runs, which I did like 24 of them or something, 3 were very memorable, and I only managed to reach the boss like 3 or 4 times, and I failed twice and won twice against the boss, the Night Lord. Or 3 times, I don't know. I would have won that 3rd time probably because we were very powerful at that instance. But I'd like to talk a little bit about those games because it showed some of the highlights that the network test had to offer. And some of those didn't really end in a victory. In fact, the 3 games I remember the most vividly, only one of them I actually managed to fully see through. And still then, I had a lot of fun just trying to get to the boss. One of these games I really have to talk about right now because it showed a lot of hope and positivity for Nightreign in the future if you don't have that much people to play with, or if somehow one of your friends drops out mid-game. And that has to do with the fact that bosses do scale or somewhat adjust themselves based on how many people you're fighting them with. Like, I was playing a whole game, seemingly, with a Guardian whilst I was playing Wilder, and we managed to get it all the way to the final boss, to the Night Lord, and we managed to win in the end, which was ridiculous. 2 people in a game that is meant for 3 people to fight cooperatively, and all the while, we couldn't communicate, only with in-game markers and gestures and stuff like that. If you played the network test and you were playing alongside a Wilder wielding a rotten great hammer who was just zooming around and trying his best, and we were just the 2 of us fighting together, then you were that Guardian. If you were that, if you're watching this or hearing about this, then huge kudos to you, man. Thank you so incredibly much for helping me get through that. That was awesome. I never knew that 2 people could beat this game because it's technically designed for 3 people. So that was awesome. Thank you so much for that experience. We were playing with a recluse in our group, and I remember that she or they left the game pretty early, so we were left together running around the map and trying to collect everything. Now, normally when I played this network test and I thought someone left, then I was like, this is probably going to be a lost cause. But in the end, we managed to pull through. So it really shows that regardless of what happens in the game, you don't have to give up. You should still try, because even if someone leaves, you still have a good shot of beating the boss. And it was one of the most memorable games I've had in the network test, and one of the most fun games. So that was pretty cool to see. The other 2 games, one of them I was very overpowered, still playing as Wilder with a really fun build. I had a Fire Naga Kiba, so I did fire, bleed, and just slashing damage with 1 weapon, and I had the Serpent Bone Blade, so I also dealt poison buildup, together with another katana dealing more bleed damage. And I also managed to pick up one of those passive effects where I did lightning upon dodging, so my build was really looking well. And at a certain point, we defeated so many bosses, the Duchess as well as the Recluse and I, that I really didn't have to pick any more weapon rewards, and I could just stock up on passive effects and become absolutely busted. And all the while, we started that particular round fighting a dragon of all things. Very too bad that round ended prematurely due to the server shutting down, because we were very close to fighting the 2nd boss of the run, because there's 3 major bosses you have to fight each run. We were very close to fighting the 3rd boss, and then the game sort of shut off, which was really, really sad. I hoped that we could finish the game, because we would have definitely beaten the final boss as a result, but that was a very fun build. I had a lot of fun playing as Wilder with these teammates because we had some kind of fun synergy going on. The Recluse was very, very, very rushful. They were very impulsive. They made decisions on the fly, and they were really berserking it. They wanted to fight everything. They went off alone. They were very, they rushed into things, and they were very aggressive, is what I mean. Meanwhile, me and the Duchess, we were just sticking together all the time and trying to save the Recluse's hide, who died like multiple times. It was very fun. It was a very fun dynamic, and it was a very fun round to play. I really enjoyed that one. And the last round was me basically channeling my inner Lady Maria as the Duchess. I had a Serpent Bone Blade, so I dealt poison damage, and I was covered in blood from head to toe, which really made me think, oh, I'm playing as Lady Maria from Bloodborne. And the best part about all of that was that I had the lightning dodge ability that allowed me to, damage enemies, and since the Duchess's passive ability allows her to really easily deal lightning damage, that was one of the most fun moments I've ever had. I loved just dodging around and going boom, boom, boom with my lightning, spamming it because of the extra dodges. It was really fun. Too bad we didn't manage to get to the Night Lord that round either, but it was really, really fun to just run around and do a bunch of cool shit with the Duchess. So yeah, that's basically how a round of Nightreign just goes. It was very fun playing Nightreign this way. I want to take some time to move on before I go to the more concerned parts and the negative parts. I want to talk a little bit about, because I've talked about more positive things here and a bit of the gameplay loop, I want to highlight some more very special moments that I really liked about this game before we go to the more critical stuff. So I really hope you enjoy. You've been making it very far into the video. If you're still around, let's talk about some of the positives and then talk a little bit about the concerns I have with this game. The whole aspect of running around and having a completely new build every single time you play is something that really fascinates me. Playing Dark Souls 3 and Elden Ring, you know, I played a lot of From Software games, and usually I stick to a build I know is somewhat viable or that can save my skin in the end. Like, I will always invest in some sort of bleed weapon in Elden Ring in case things get a little too tough near the end of the game. So having something that completely shakes up things, where one round you're just playing with the standard dagger you've gotten due to bad, or you start with due to bad loot and your team not playing very optimized or not very optimally, you know, that stuff, that can happen, but it's really refreshing to have each and every single time you play this game different weapons that you can use. I was also just a huge fan of the gameplay cycle and just the fact that there were these little dungeons flung together and the chaos and you making decisions on where to go to. It was really... You have to experience it to sort of get a feeling for how it feels, the sort of rush you get to beat things in time and to be as done as quickly as possible with certain spots, and also making tactical decisions that sometimes you really don't even think about. If you raid a fortress with a lot of mages in it, it tends to have a lot more loot that is magic oriented compared to if you raid a particular camp full of Leyndell knights. They tend to have more standard weaponry. That sort of decisions are very fun to make, and it's really fun to just open the map and select a target and to just go there. I really loved that. What I also really appreciated is the fact that From Software has a lot of, they put a lot of effort into when they bring back certain older enemies, such as the Centipede Demon, which I fought a lot during the network test, more on that later, that they bring back the old theme, a bunch of moves, and they also included some new moves for a lot of characters that I also, for enemies and a lot of characters that I also really appreciated. Like the Centipede Demon has a bunch of new extra moves that I didn't really see before, or it was just me being done very quickly with the fight, I don't know. But, you know, there's some very cool little tweaks that they've done to certain enemies, but what I loved a lot as well is that they decided to bring back the Centipede Demon boss fight theme for the Centipede Demon in this particular game. Like, they could have settled with Formidable Foe 1 or 2, the standard theme that a lot of bosses have in Elden Ring, usually the copy-paste cave bosses, but they decided to put in the extra effort to include a completely different track from Dark Souls. Like, they didn't make a completely new one, but I still appreciate that attention to detail, and I really like that they did that. I should probably mention how the boss fights work in this game. Basically, you have a bunch of bosses that roam around that you can choose to beat. They're completely optional. There's a bunch of them out there, and they drop the rewards I previously mentioned, but you also have a bunch of mandatory bosses. Once the map sort of shrinks to a particular small circle, your goal is to then battle a big boss that usually gets... that's usually following some kind of mob enemy or some kind of you basically have to fight some prelude enemies before you battle the boss. And in the Nightreign Network test for the Centipede Demon, these were the hands you see in Karia Manor, you know, the big ones that are weak to fire. I also battled against 2 Omens when I was going to fight Margit, and I also battled some demi-humans whenever I was going to fight the demi-human queen and demi-human swordmaster boss, which was pretty interesting to see. You can kind of predict what enemy or boss is coming up before you battle them, based on these little prelude enemies. And after that, a boss just spawns. You have to battle them. It's either try or die. And this is also a good time to explain how the knockout system works. So basically, take the ring of health from Mario Odyssey. You know, the ring that always shows up surrounding the heart icon in the game. And remove the heart icon. That is what shows up when someone gets knocked out. If they get knocked out for the first time, they get 1 purple bar that you have to deplete by dealing damage to them. If they get knocked out twice, it's 2, and when it happens for a 3rd time, they get 3 separate bars. And the longer you did not get knocked out, the less bars you will have. So that's basically how the knockout system works. If all of your allies get knocked out, you instantly end in a defeat. Otherwise, you basically have to revive them and you can keep going. It's also the case that normally on the field, from what I've experienced, if the knockout bar is applied to you, if you're knocked out, you have a certain amount of time for your allies to help you before it depletes. But if you are fighting a big boss, like the final boss of the run, or Margit, or the Centipede Demon, then instead you have unlimited time to get to your allies, but you will have to watch out for the fact that those bars will recover every single second or so, so you have to stay on those bars and actively damage them, otherwise they'll go back to the previous value they were in. So if you had like 3 bars at the start and someone brought you back to 1, if you wait for too long it will go back up to 2 and to 3. That's how the knockout system works. Anyways, back to the bosses. So fighting the bosses is a lot of fun because you basically are in this try or die. It's either you or them that has to die here, which is a very fun little mechanic, and I really love how they sort of spiced up some of the bosses. Movesets have been altered. You know, Morgoth/Margit actually has fucking one mind now. The same move that Ishin has if you battle him in Sekiro, in the Shura ending. You can literally see him spam multiple slash attacks that deal bleed damage. It's not exactly one mind, but it looks a little bit like it. Another very positive and fun thing that I have noted about the bosses, at least for Margit, is that sometimes one of the characters or one of my teammates would have a marker on them, and it seems like whatever I try to do, Margit would always focus on my teammate. It looks a little bit like a crosshair, the same crosshair you have when you aim in the game with a bow. It will be placed on one of your teammates and it'll constantly be targeted by the boss. This gives you, the other teammates, the opportunity to play into this by making the one that gets aggroed the one who distracts the boss, basically the tank of the team or the dodge tank, so that the others can deal massive damage as time goes on. It's really fun to figure out little things like this. It's really nice to see this. The boss fights are just so much fun, including the Night Lord, which is just, oh my god. The fact that the Night Lord boss is 3 wolves together as a sort of Cerberus-like creature that you can fight 1 versus 3, and then it splits up into 3 separate beasts, it's so incredibly fun. You can decide to instead have all 3 of you battle 1 wolf separately, or, and that's something I did as well, instead I tried to draw attention of all 3 of the wolves to give my teammate a little bit of a break and to sort of take turns battling all the 3 wolves at once. That also worked really nicely, and it was a really fun way of battling in this game. There's multiple strategies you can deploy depending on your character and team to tackle certain opponents, which was really fun. And of course, a thing I really liked as well is the characters you could play as and their abilities. They were really fun to play around with, and they give characters some very unique little things that you can do, and some very unique abilities that if you master them, you can play around with them very nicely. What I love so much about this particular system is that even though every character has different abilities, you're not locked to a certain type of build. If you're playing as Wilder, you don't have to exclusively wield big swords. You can also saddle for something smaller if you want. It's definitely possible. Not really recommended, but it's possible. So even if you pick a character, it doesn't immediately define the type of build you're going to have, or the type of weapon you're going to wield, I should rather say. To very shortly talk about the characters and their abilities, Wilder has a grappling hook that allows you to very quickly move across the map, as well as it allows you to pull enemies towards you if they are smaller than you, like human-sized enemies you can pull towards you, and bigger enemies you will be pulled towards them. So that's a really neat way of playing as Wilder. He has a passive ability that allows you to be saved from a lethal hit once. You can cheat death once. It's literally just if you would get hit and die, you basically live through that hit, which is really neat. And his ultimate ability is literally the flame barrel from Sekiro, huge fire explosion. The Guardian had some of the more slightly disappointing abilities. He has a little whirlwind that can knock enemies on the ground. Very neat, especially since you can, even if enemies are on the ground or are in a critical hit animation or getting backstabbed, you know, normally moves that would prevent you from killing someone or damaging an enemy because they need some time to recover, have some recovery frames, you can still damage them during those moments in Nightreign. So knocking someone on the ground gives you a huge advantage. It's a very neat ability for the Guardian to have. He has a special ability when you dodge and block. He will basically do a little shield bash, which I thought was really neat. Didn't really use it much. And his ultimate, where he dive bombs on certain enemies, is very good for crowd control, but a little bit lacking in the damage department, maybe. And yeah, moving on, the Duchess is probably my favorite character to play as because of her abilities. You get the Bloodborne freaking dodges, the dodge, the sidestep, which is really busted, and you have double dodges due to the fact that you can press the dodge button twice to get some cool side flips and double dodges, which with the lightning upon dodge is just really freaking busted. I really love that ability on the Duchess. So that's her passive ability. She also has the triggerable ability to rewind time for like 5 or 10 seconds and apply the damage that has been dealt to the boss again, which is really neat. You do have to be locked on for this, but it's really cool to see this ability. I love it so incredibly much. It makes playing as the Duchess so incredibly fun due to the extra damage you can dish out. She's the glass cannon, basically. Then her ultimate allows you to hide all of your allies. Everyone will become invisible. Every single enemy will de-aggro, which is really neat if you need to set up a big crowd control action or if you're getting overwhelmed, or even when fighting a boss. You can use this ability to literally just hide your teammates. The boss will de-aggro, which gives you a good window to heal or to go in for a big charge attack. And it also really works well when exploring the world because you can hide your team and, you know, not get detected and sneak around places. It can work really well. And finally, the Recluse. I didn't really pay any attention to the passive ability. Something with or FP restoration, which is, you know, that was pretty much something I didn't really notice much because it didn't play as much as the Recluse. Except her other two abilities are really cool. You have an ability where she can absorb either magic, holy, lightning, or fire damage that has been dealt to an opponent. Up to 3 of those elements, and you can bundle them together. She's like a lot of options, a lot of mixtures she can do. And every single mixture of each element gives a different type of spell that you can then unleash. For an example, Fire, Holy Fire is different from Holy Fire Magic. All those kinds of different spell abilities. You know, it's a really fun micromanaging system to play around with and a very fun ability. Her ultimate basically marks your target, and whenever you attack it, you'll regain FP and HP, which is just so brilliant, and you could use that very well in combination with stuff like the Duchess, who is very fast in terms of attacking speed. It works really, really well, and that's why I love these characters so much. Their abilities are very fun and cool to use. So that's also a very big kudos to From Software. They made this game incredibly fun to play. So yeah, that's a lot of positives I had to say. There's a couple of things I still want to point out that I really thought were very nice little ideas and additions to the game. For an example, in the best run we had, we were around level 13 to 14, which is really high in a game of Nightreign. When suddenly we were walking up to the top of a castle where we were going to fight Loretta, you know, the boss from the Halig tree in Caria Manor, when suddenly I heard something like, "Foul tarnished, pillagers of the lands between, vile thieves. And then Market just invaded us, and we had to fight Market together with Loretta, which was crazy that it happened. I did not expect that at all. Market just came popping out of nowhere, which I think is sort of... It depends on which level you are. If you are high level, I think only then will he show up to not punish players any further if they're struggling. And also what I noticed is that Market sort of targets a specific member of your group, and if they die, Market will disappear again. So he will not stay around forever. We did manage to beat Loretta at a certain point, though, which was absolutely fantastic. I loved fighting Loretta and Market at the same time, even though it was a little bit of a cluster chuck. It was really fun to battle these together. And it was really fun that it is a thing. And also something you can encounter is one of those black sludge orbs that the bosses spawn from, that you have to fight, the mandatory bosses. They also spawn around the overworld, and then we got invaded by ants. But if you beat those particular ants, you get, like, increased HP restoration, or you get some very cool effect. I don't know exactly what it was, but you get a pretty cool effect from that. It's just an additional reward you can collect. There's a lot of different things and objectives you can do. So yeah, no run seemingly is the same due to the different weapons you can pick up and the different sort of runs you have. Sometimes you fail an objective, sometimes you have a god run and you basically lose because you thought you were going to win. Got a little cocky and things just didn't work out, and at other times one of your teammates left the game and you think, oh, this is not going to be it, and you still win. How? I don't know, but I found that very amusing and very fun in this game. Definitely one of the highlights. But yeah, since that is one of the highlights, that's really all the positive things I could really think of out of the top of my head. This game was just awesome. Oh, the soundtrack. I should definitely talk about the soundtrack, because even though there weren't a lot of new tracks in the game itself, the new tracks that there were in the game, like the theme that plays when you play a game, the Night Lord theme, the main menu theme, all of them fucking slapped. Oh, sorry, I swore. But they were really, really good. I loved those. But yeah, that's really all of the positive things I have to say. Aside from the fact that I just remembered that I didn't talk about the sort of slightly updated moveset for some weapons like greatswords and daggers. They're slightly faster, which is also really nice, but now we really have to move on to the next segment, and that is some of the worries and critiques I have about this game, because this game played very roughly, and yeah, let's talk about that. My first and biggest criticism with this game is that when I played the network test, we had two different maps, two different seeds that essentially were picked for us. They were hand-picked for us, and you would be dropped on one of those two every single time you played. One of them was the one with Centipede Demon and Market, which I played on for like, maybe 20 or 19 of the 23 games I played, which means that a lot of the time was spent playing one map, and you can definitely see, or definitely feel the game becoming a lot more stale when you're playing on that same map, because you start knowing the layout, the bosses are always the same, you're literally fighting the same enemies every single time. It's like if you're playing Elden Ring and every area is literally Limgrave. That's literally what's happening here. Even when going through Elden Ring like for my third or fourth time now, I still find a couple of new things. Nothing major, but you find these little itty bitty little thingies, little things that you didn't notice before. And the same thing goes for Nightreign if you play on the same map over and over, but it gets stale very fast for a game that is supposed to be a game where literally every single run is nothing you've played before. It's completely unique. But due to the limited amount of maps we could play on, things felt very, very stale, and that made me worried, because if we're going to get around 10 more of these maps, like if this game is going to be random in the sense that there are like 10 or 12 automatically pre-generated maps that the game randomly chooses from, then we're going to run into a problem that we're going to have the same maps and they'll become very stale. You'll get a meta for each of the places you want to go to. that will become very boring, and as well as something was just up with the RNG, because I kept getting the same maps over and over again. It was only in the later sessions that I actually managed to play on the newer map, the other map, and even then there were a lot of enemies and structures that felt the same way. There were a lot of reused things, there were a lot of things the same. I recognized a lot of things. I'm really worried, and that's because I don't know the full scope of the game. If what we have seen here is maybe a fifth of all of the content in the game, I'm not talking about the maps itself just yet, but all of the randomization, that I'm not too worried about that, because making a randomizer like that is pretty doable. But if this game is going to include like 15 different structures, and with different structures I mean actually different structures, and then there's for each structure like 6 variations because there's different enemies on the same structures. I noticed that in the network test too. Then if we get that amount of structures, then the game is going to run out of content really fast. If what we've seen right here in the network test today is like 1% of what the full game has to offer in terms of enemy scale and enemy variety, sort of map variety, then this game will stay relevant for a long time. But if this is already like 10%, or maybe just a little bit less even still, like 8%, I'm still going to get worried, because that means that the game will get very boring and stale very fast due to the lack of new additional content. From Software has sort of shown off in trailers that there will be poison swamps and more different areas, so I am very positive and hopeful that we'll explore some different biomes perhaps in the full game. Like maybe there's a biome with just a rot biome, a poison biome, maybe there's a big river biome, a snow biome, Kalid biome, stuff like that. It's Elden Ring, so there's enough biome variety to take from. There's enough areas to sort of take inspiration from. Would be cool to see a Halictree / Farm Azula kind of map. Even since there's now no fall damage anymore, that's really chill to have. But I'm very worried that every single map you're going to play is just these structures that have been pre-generated with pre-generated enemies on them that will basically do the same thing every single time. I'm very worried about that, because it makes the experience grow very stale. There's a lot of the same stuff in the network test. The same fortress literally copy-pasted over and over again, just with different enemies. It doesn't help that we got 2 separate maps here, 2 different maps, and not anything else beyond that variety, but it makes me a little worried about the scale of this game. Aside from just a repetition, I'm just worried that there may not be enough to do in the game. I've heard that in the full game there will be ways to explore the backgrounds of all of the characters you can play as, 4 of which we haven't seen, and there is going to be DLC, so there will even be more. But I'm still a little bit worried about how much there is to do in the game. If the game has 5 Night Lords, then some people will burn through it very, very quickly, given the fact that, the first round I played, literally the first game of Nightreign I played, I immediately beat the Night Lord. Which means that if you are playing this game and there's like 5 of them and you get a little bit lucky, you can finish the game very fast. Which is fun if that's your goal, but is there any extra goal or ulterior goal to beating the game besides beating the Night Lords? Is there like a collecting objective? Is there some kind of other sort of extra content besides the main quest? Like Elden Ring, yes, you can become Elden Lord, but you need only 2 Great Runes for that. There's various locations you can visit in order to collect more Great Runes that don't include the main quest per se. Some of them are very out of the way, DLC included. Like Midra's Manse is so far away, it's crazy. And it's so hidden. Is there going to be anything for Nightreign in that regard? Because I felt like I had seen a lot of it very quickly. Like, this was one Night Lord that we battled. Are they going to switch things up a little? Like, What I imagine this game right now is that it feels a little bit like the Bloodborne Chalice dungeons, in that, of course, you're not going to escape the fact that From Software has to make little set pieces every single time, like little fortresses, little churches. They have to make set enemy encounters so that things aren't completely random, because that would be game-breaking. The Chalice dungeons are like that, but the Chalice dungeons also felt a little bit repetitive. Once you've seen Chalice Dungeon A and a bunch of its rooms, you will, on the second and third layer of said Chalice dungeon, not encounter much new things, which is a little bit bothersome, and I hope that Elden Ring Nightreign won't fall into that same category and will stay fresh with new experiences every single time. If there is like, in terms of maps, if there's like a possibility of 15 million different maps being able to be randomly generated due to all of the different set pieces being able to be generated at different spots, then that would be really, really nice, because it gives the game a lot of longevity and a lot of long-term potential. But otherwise, it really doesn't work that well. The game doesn't really become as fun to play if you start finding out patterns in the level design, which makes me a little bit worried. For my second point, we have to talk about balancing, and I'm not really talking about each of the characters, because I feel like the playable characters are fairly balanced, even compared to each other. Maybe the Duchess is a little bit broken, but that may be because I've played more as her and gotten a better understanding of her type of character, because I like to play those very aggressive type of characters a lot in Souls-likes. Maybe it's just that way I see the Duchess as a little bit more powerful, but I feel like the characters have been balanced fairly well, but certain things in the game play itself, certain objectives that you can complete, are very much just way better than others. For an example, boss fights as well as Churches of America are some of the most supreme objectives on your map. You want to visit both of those, battle as much bosses as possible, as much times as possible, and definitely visit as much Churches of America as you can, because those are your two primary interests. The rest of all of the optional little dungeons, you know, they are not as important as the rest of the things you encounter. And I'm specifically, too, talking about ruins or specific fortresses, you know. You will know certain layouts of certain set pieces, and you'll know which bosses to go for. Some bosses are not even in a set piece at all, and are just wandering about. For an example, I've seen a bunch of wandering golden hippos, or for an example, the ants that I mentioned previously. They are also just random map events that you just stumble across. It's just way easier to just take them down whilst you're on your way to your next objective, because the loot is so much better from bosses, especially the ones in fortresses and camps, compared to when you just go to a completely different ruin or to one of those rise towers with the magic artifacts. You know, the loot, in my experience, from bosses tends to be just way better than anything else on the map. Same thing goes for Churches of America. The reason being is that a boss will always drop 3 separate items, where normally if you loot one of the chests in a camp, you might get something you cannot use. Whenever you have a boss, they will always give you a passive effect that is at least of some use, and the rewards tend to be much better than opening a random chest. Beating a boss is 10 times better than opening 5 chests in a camp, because of the sheer amount of loot you get from it, and not just the weapons, but also the runes. You get a lot of runes for just beating a boss, and some of them are very easy too, so it's really neat to beat a boss and just get that extra bit of items. And I'm talking about bosses here, but I'm not referring to bosses in a jail. In fact, wandering bosses or bosses in a castle or fortress give much better and much more rewards than bosses in a jail. Because bosses in a jail, as well as, and that's one of my biggest complaints and one of the biggest things I think From Software should look at in terms of balancing, is that upgrading your weapons with smithing stones, collecting stone sword keys to open jails, and certain types of enemies and bosses are not worth defeating it for the rewards you get. I remember one of the rounds I found a stone sword key, and the round prior to that I ran up to a jail thinking that I could battle the boss there, but you needed a stone sword key in order to do that. Well, then I found a stone sword key, but you need to remove it. It goes into the same slots as your consumable items, so sometimes you don't have the space for one of these. So you have to throw out an item you previously had. Then you insert the stone sword key into the imp statue, the boss spawns, and then you have to battle them. But what I found strange is that I didn't get any rewards for beating a jail boss. A boss you'll have to go out of your way for to battle, because you need to find a stone sword key and a jail at the same time, both in time before the rain comes in, and then you need to beat the boss before it falls outside of the map range, and you get nothing. You only get a bunch of runes, but a normal boss gives you one of 3 items that you can even choose between. A jail boss gives you literally nothing. Nothing to choose from, unless it's the person who inserted the stone sword key into the imp statue. If that is really the case, and if that is that particular person or player gets the loot, then it's so incredibly frustrating, because normal bosses give you more loot. Every single member can pick a weapon or effect or talisman or something. Each and every single individual gets to choose a reward. You have to go through way less of a hassle in order to get your reward. And all the while, you literally just have less work. You need to put in less work for a better reward, whilst jail bosses are not worth it because they don't give you anything. And then there's the nomadic merchant and the smithing anvil where you can upgrade your weapons. They don't really work out that well either. The bosses or the nomads, they have very limited stock, and usually I go there to buy consumable items, because the items they sell are usually not as good as you would encounter them in the overworld just exploring. I have seen the nomadic merchant, you always get them when you near the end of the run, just before facing off against the Night Lord. You probably have some leftover runes that you can spend on some consumable items maybe, or on a final weapon if the nomadic merchant happens to sell a weapon you really want. But that doesn't really make it that much useful. The nomadic merchants are also in spots where they're pretty decently hard to find, so you won't really encounter them much either. They don't feel worth the hassle to find them, and they sell some decent loot sometimes, but if they do not fit what you're trying to go for, then you have a problem. And then there's also the smithing tablet, or whatever you do to upgrade your weapon. Now this is absolutely not worth it. Just like with stone sword keys, you have to carry around smithing stones for this. And I find it so dumb that they take up extra slots for your consumable items, because it really doesn't help that weapons that you want to upgrade. First of all, you need a weapon you want to upgrade, then you'll need a smithing stone, which is either a 1, a 2, a 3, or a 4 or something. You need the exact smithing stone for your exact weapon, and if you don't have that, you cannot upgrade your weapon. Those smithing tables are not around everywhere. If you're playing the game, you'll have to look for them too. And since a smithing stone fills a slot where you could put a useful consumable, like one of those warmth stones, which heals you and your allies, or some fire pot, some kind of grease, boiled prawn, which boosts your defense, which is really neat to have. Mainly because consumables are very good in the run, because the runs are technically, compared to Elden Ring runs, very short. So, and there's moments where you definitely face off against bosses. You have enough time to consume the consumables, you know. Consumables are just really good. So carrying them out in the smithing stone that you may or may not be able to use, that fills up an inventory slot like this, is absolutely useless. And you also need the correct smithing stone for the correct weapon. If you're wielding a weapon that is tier 3 and you want to upgrade it to tier 4, you gotta pray to God you find the correct smithing stone and a smithing tablet in time. Otherwise you'll have to hold on to that item until just before the final Night Lord. And I don't think nomadic merchants sell any smithing stones either, so that is also really annoying. That would instantly solve the problem of smithing stones and nomadic merchants at the same time, because it gives them some, some extra use near the end of a run. You can get one final upgrade in on your main weapon before the final boss if you're lucky. But otherwise, you don't have time to find a smithing stone, and you don't have the space to find a smithing stone or fit it in your inventory somewhere. given that you may or may not have the ability to upgrade your weapon at all, and consumables are just so much better. Like, I really appreciate the option being there, but it's not very useful, because 9 out of the 10 times you'll find something better out there in the world than a smithing stone that you want to use to upgrade your already pretty decent weapon. You'll most likely find a way better weapon out in the wild, trust me. It has happened to me a lot. I only upgraded a weapon once in all of my 20 or so games, because I only managed to find a smithing stone once and carry it with me to one of those smithing anvils, which happened to be nearby too. It was a really lucky set of circumstances that allowed me to do it. So that is one of the bigger concerns I have. Please balance that out and make that better. And it really sucks, because some of these things I really wanted to use. Like, I really wanted to upgrade my weapons sometimes, or explore caves, because there are caves in the game. But caves are so much harder to find, and if you're stuck in a cave in the Nightreign, you're not going to get out of that very quickly. So getting out of a cave is really tough. And that's why I didn't explore it, because there's a lot more speed involved with just going to a fortress, beating the boss at the top, claiming a reward, and then moving on. You don't have to clear out an entire fortress, but usually with a cave, you have to go through the entire thing in order to go to the boss. And that's really where they need to sort of improve some of the facets of the game. They need to buff certain aspects of it, because right now it isn't really working what they're trying to do with the bosses or with some of the bosses and some of the designs for some of the dungeons, and for the nomadic merchant and the smithing upgrade thingy. Like, there's a huge imbalance between certain set pieces on the map. And the final thing I want to say about that is that if all maps are going to include this massive centerpiece, because I've noticed that both of the maps you play on have a huge castle in the center, where there's a lot of loot to be gotten. I get that it's a very cool idea, but I've noticed that you really want to go there on day 2, due to there being 3 enemies. In the case I went there was a troll that threw pots, a lion, and the boss up top, which was either Loretta or a Godskin noble. They all drop some of those boss rewards, so you can get one of 3 items, which is really neat, but it sucks that you basically then know, okay, this is the prime spot to go to, and there's a huge imbalance between that big castle in the middle and some of the other optional dungeons that you can tackle. So there has to be some balancing that needs to be done with certain parts of the game mechanics, in order to make the game feel a little bit more balanced and more exciting to explore, because otherwise I just won't interact with some of the mechanics, which is a little bit sad. And finally, a bit of a minor complaint maybe, but this game really felt like an Elden Ring fan mod, and I don't mean that as in From Software has just taken base Elden Ring and tried something new, but I mostly mean this as in From Software has taken base Elden Ring and taken all of Elden Ring's assets and then flipped the game script a little and added a completely new game mode to the game. The reason I'm bringing this up is because the trailer teased the Nameless King, Duke's Dear Freya, and the Centipede Demon, which we also encountered in the game itself in the network test, as battleable bosses, but for the rest, this game doesn't really add anything new. It's mostly, for at least the network test right now, a big asset flip of Elden Ring itself, and that is kind of disappointing, seeing as I saw a new Elden Ring Nightreign game. Like, an asset flip is fine. I don't have too much big problems with that, but I have seen some new stuff. Where is the new stuff? Are we going to exclusively use Elden Ring enemies as the base fodder in the game? Like, when I saw the fact that the Nameless King was a battleable boss, that you could beat him in-game, I was like, are they also going to include some enemies from Dark Souls 3, like the Corvian enemies, or some of the Undead Hollows, maybe some Lothric Knights here and there, maybe some Dark Wraiths, some Basilisk, oh wait, those were in Elden Ring too. But you know, maybe the Grus, or some of the demons from Dark Souls, maybe even some standard enemies from Sekiro or Bloodborne. It would be really cool to see those in the game. Oh, and I'm even forgetting Demon Souls, by the way. Why don't we, you know, are they going to include some of those enemies from older IPs in the game as well? Because all I've encountered that wasn't from base Elden Ring where some of the DLC enemies, which were just the hippo, as well as the demi-human swordmaster, I saw the chests in the game, the common chests that drop mostly weapons. Those were the chests from Dark Souls 3. Then I battled Centipede Demon, and only other thing that wasn't from the original Elden Ring was the Night Lord. And everything else was just straight up lifted from Elden Ring itself, from the base game. And it kind of made me a little bit sad. Like, do we not... You have a huge catalog of very cool characters lying around. Are we going to include those in the full game? And it makes me worried that maybe From Software is only bringing back, like, maybe one boss for each game. Maybe 2 or 3. Are we going to get Centipede Demon, Stray Demon, and I don't know, Seath as the bosses for Dark Souls? I'm a little bit worried that this game showed some really cool fan service in a very nice sense, in which there are some really cool bosses that make their return. But are we going to see more assets from previous games? Because that would be awesome. Because right now this game feels a lot like Elden Ring, which makes sense, it's in the title. But I can also play Elden Ring if I want to just beat up a bunch of Lanedale Knights. And that's also what kind of bothered me, especially because it feels so repetitive. I've encountered boss fights in the Nightreign Network test that were literally like, okay, here's 3 Lanedale Knights, go beat all 3 of them, that's the boss. Here is here are 3 Flame Chariots, go beat all of them. And it makes me feel like this game is sort of giving some generic enemies the Godskin Duo treatment, where you get not the Godskin Duo, but the Lanedale Knight Trio, the Flame Chariot Trio. Watch them come on with the Erdtree Avatar Trio. That would be fun in a way, but it would also be a little bit lazy. Like, you can choose to make the Lanedale Knight Trio, but you could also spawn in a bunch of Dark Souls 3 Hollows and call them the Hollow Troop, maybe, or something like that. You have a lot of assets to pull from. I think that, and that's mostly my guess, because the trailer has shown this big dragon that noms Wilder in one of the trailers, and they've shown the Poison Swamp, the Nameless King, and Duke's Dear Freya weren't in the network test. I feel like they're leaving the more unique stuff, the mostly non-Elden Ring stuff, for in the full game, which I appreciate. But on the other hand, it made the network test feel a little stale. And if indeed that is going to be is going to mirror the final product, I'm a little worried about that. But aside from that, I really still enjoy playing the network test. It's a minor gripe I have, because it feels a lot like an Elden Ring mod and not something From Software makes with their entire asset library. Like, they have so much to pull from. Why didn't they pull from all of those things? I really hope that they've just hidden it from us right now, and that the full game is going to have, like, Nameless King, Lorien and Lothric, the Abyss Watchers, can just invade you and screw over your run. I think that would be very fun. So yeah, I think that is probably one of my minor gripes, but still something I'm a little worried about. Holy damn, this was one of the longer scripted videos I've made in a while. A very long scripted video. This video is around almost an hour long. So if you made it this far, I want to thank you very much for watching all the way through. Huge shout out once again to user jmastaock for allowing me to play the network test and allowing me to make this video. I really enjoyed playing the network test. Oh, and as a funny bonus, here, have a clip where I'm playing as the Guardian, and I got this funny glitch where instead of healing with the normal flask animation, I do a perfumer animation. It was really fun. Anyways, yeah, those are my thoughts about Nightreign, and I get the skepticism that some people have, but I do not get the pessimism against this game, because personally, I feel like this game has the potential to become a massive hit. It just depends on if they manage to tackle those things I'm so worried about. If things are truly as they are seeming right now, if they only showed us a little bit of the content, then this game is going to be absolutely fantastic probably in the future due to the massive amounts of content this game has to offer. But if this is going to be a very small game and they're only using very limited assets from their library. Things are staying a little bit imbalanced, and the game doesn't have really that much to offer in terms of objectives, and the randomization doesn't really make for much new experiences, then we're going to run into a huge problem, and this game will probably not even last half a year. But yeah, those are my thoughts on this. I really do enjoyed playing this game. It was a fun time, even for the 6 hours I played. Even if things got a little bit repetitive, I was hooked. I was really hooked. It's a very brave endeavor that From Software is embarking on right now, and I really hope Nightreign will succeed, because it will allow From Software to experiment, which is what got Dark Souls into such popularity to begin with. But yeah, that's really all I have to say about it. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. It's up to you now. Let me know what you thought about the network test if you've played. If not, let me know what you think about Nightreign and of itself. Let's discuss concerns and cool things about it. Shameless self-plug here in my own video. Subscribe if you haven't. I don't know what I'll upload next. It's always a little bit of a surprise, but if you enjoyed this video, it would mean the world to me if you subscribed. And leave a like if you enjoyed this video. Or not, if you disliked it and disagreed with me. Sure, go ahead and leave a comment why, because I'm very curious to your thoughts on this game. Anyways, that's all from me, XPGamesNL. Thank you so much for watching this particular video. I really hope you enjoyed, and I will see you guys in the next one, or when this game fully releases. I might make another video on it then. Thank you so much. Once again, huge shout out to user jmastaock, and I'll see you guys all next time. Goodbye, and thanks for listening.